You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
I want the people to know that they still have out of 3 branches of the government working for them, and that ain't bad.
Hi, welcome to another video from aplaintruth.info. And on this day, July 4th, 1776, where the United States of America has got all their red, white, and blue flags flying as they think it's patriotic as we, the people, and the United States citizens are celebrating their independence, where nothing could be further from the truth. So let's debunk all this a little more. We're the Founding Fathers, ordinary people, and then we'll get into taxation, and then we'll get into the CAFR reports where they hide all the excess money, steal it, skim it from the top, put it in offshore accounts to the tune of tens of trillions of dollars. So this is from a piece last 2 years ago, 2015. Scott Walker, governor who's running for president, tells the audience a story about his first visit to Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where the Founding Fathers, all 55, 56 of them, all white men, all rich landowners, were trying to set up the we the people country and, omit women, omit Native Americans, omit slaves, but it's we the people that own land. So Walker has many times called the Founding Father ordinary people, and while campaigning, he emphasized that he himself didn't come from wealth or providence, even bragging that he bought a sweater for $1. So let's rewrite the little history here from what people are selling us into what's really happening. According to Brown University Emeritus History Professor Gordon Wood, author of Creation of the American Republic, the Founding Fathers, they were elite of the day involving the highest levels of society. And I'm not going to get into it here, but folks, just take a look at their homes. Here's George Washington's home, and the home was so big, it was known as Mount Vernon. The guy had a whole mountain. Mr. George, Founding Father, didn't tell a lie, worked for the Jesuits, Freemason. James Madison, 4th president, grew up on plantation his family owned in Montpelier. They had to have a whole name for it. Look at the size of these estates, folks. In 1732, James Madison became the sole proprietor when he was able to retire from public life after he spent his time in politics. And he spent the rest of his life expanding his mansion. He had tons of money, folks. Thomas Jefferson was said to be so broke that at his death, he had borrowed so much money from the government that they took all his books in his library and formed the Library of Congress. Yet look what he was able to build. It still stands today on his estate called Monticello. Yeah, these are ordinary people, folks. John Adams, look at this estate, folks. Quincy, Massachusetts, just outside Boston. He bought it at the end of the Revolutionary War. Where did he get all this money? They were broke. They were done with scripts. Abraham Lincoln had to come up with the greenback. They were so broke. John Adams had a pretty good mansion here. Ben Franklin, he didn't go for the mansions too much. But then over here we got Alexander Hamilton, the British nobility, the man who founded the currencies, the banking system, and started the money system. His success in politics and law, making all this money, allowed this to commission architect John McComb to design a country home on his 50 acres of land in Upper Manhattan, what's now called Hamilton Heights in Harlem. So you see, folks, these guys just had incredible wealth. So let's get into the taxation without representation or taxation with representation. They both stink, and it's both to enrich the rich and keep us poor and enslaved. So let's get into it. So I want to start with on this July 4th, 1776, declared Day of Independence from the British. We're no independence whatsoever. We're massively in debt and we're being worked. This is from the Economic Collapse blog. Americans will spend more than 7 billion hours preparing for their taxes and hand over $4 trillion to federal, state, and local governments. This is your work. This is your earnings, folks. You're handing it over. 30% of what they earn will pay their income taxes. Most people work till April 15th, tax day, just to pay their taxes every year. By the time all is said and done, a significant portion of the population ends up paying more than half of what they earn to the government, which is, as I showed before, is a corporation in the previous videos. So you can look at all these taxes: airport transportation, cigarette tax, dog's license fees, employer Medicare tax, Social Security tax, estate tax. They tax you when you're born, tax you when you die. federal unemployment taxes, fishing license taxes, gift taxes, gasoline taxes, garbage taxes, highway access, hazardous waste taxes, hotel taxes, hunting license tax, import tax, inheritance tax, individual health, inspection fees, IRS tax, penalty taxes, library taxes, liquor taxes, local corporate, income, state, school taxes, luxury taxes, marriage license taxes, Medicare taxes, parking meters, passport fees, property taxes. Think how people own property and how much revenue comes in, money comes in for property taxes, folks. It's amazing. Real estate taxes, toll booth taxes, state corporate taxes, state park entrance fees, telephone taxes, tire taxes, traffic fines, use taxes, utility taxes, vehicle registration, water rights, well permit fees, workman compensation, zoning permit. When the federal income tax was originally introduced a little more than 100 years ago, most Americans were taxed at 1%. The U.S. tax code is now 13.8 million words long. 75 years ago, it was 2 pages long. Today, it's 198 pages on the 1040. There's 4,428 changes to the tax code over the last decade. Ignorance is no excuse. The IRS has almost 2,000 different publication forms and instruction sheets. And here's, just an obvious one. 46 different tax professionals completed a tax return for a hypothetical household. All 46 came up with different results. This is also like how you allow you to drive at 65. The speed limit on a freeway might be 65, but everybody drives 75. Everybody's breaking the law in one way or the other. All right, so let's get into CAFR, the comprehensive annual financial reports, where they skim money off the top, put in offshore accounts, and keep telling us we're broke when we are clearly not broke. So let's get into the comprehensive annual financial reports, or known as CAFR, C-A-F-R. But I just wanted to show you where we're ending up. The super rich hold over $32 trillion in offshore havens, so they don't have to pay taxes, siphoning off from the government, as we'll show. This was from Reuters. The study estimating the extent of global private financial wealth held in offshore accounts, excluding non-financial assets such as real estate, gold, yachts, and racehorses, puts the sum at between $21 and $32 trillion. Now remember, folks, this is back in 2012, July 22nd. The report also highlights the impact of the balance sheets of 139 developing countries of money held in tax havens by the private elites, putting wealth beyond the reach of local tax authorities. The research estimates since the 1970s, the richest citizens of these 139 countries had amassed 7.3 to 9.3 trillion of unrecorded offshore wealth by 2010. Private wealth held offshore represents a huge black hole in the world economy. No shit. Well, let's see how they got all this money, folks. It's the CAFR. You need to learn about the CAFR reports, comprehensive annual financial reports. All right. So this is from a post I did a couple years back, and all the credit goes to Walter Bruin and Clint Richardson out of Utah, who brought this to the public's attention, and I happened to pick it up, and it's really important that we start understanding where our money goes when we pay all our taxes and pay to the government. And as I proved in the other videos previous, U.S. government, Washington, D.C. is a corporation held in state by the City of London and the Vatican, and you can go back and do the research there. So, questions. Where does our state, muni, sales, corporate, income, schools, and tax money go when we pay it, okay? How come we're always broke? Where does the pension money go from a government holds of ours for decades? Where does our insurance money go? Where does the lottery money collected go? Where does Social Security money go? Workman's compensation paying? Why do we pay taxes for schools if we have no children? Where does the money go if someone dies before collecting their Social Security, even though they paid in every year since they've worked until their death? If gas taxes go to fix roads and bridges, if property taxes and buildings go to build local utility and infrastructure, if sales taxes go to support local infrastructure, then where does our local, state, and federal taxes go that we pay into each year? All right, so let's get into it. So, again, this is from a post I'll put in here, but it's titled The Greatest Scam, We're Not Broke, Far From It. The easiest way to steal money from someone is them to never know they had it in the first place, okay? And just a sidebar, why we pay taxes, and every person will answer the exact same way. We've been programmed like little parrots. If we don't pay taxes, come on, folks, fill it in. If we don't pay taxes, we will go to jail. Even my fifth grade kids I talk to, they say the same thing. By fifth grade, they all know they'll go to jail if they don't pay their taxes. It's been programmed into us. All right, so what if you were to find out that most, if not all, state, county, and city governments in the United States are not broke? What if you were to find out that the money we've been paying into our governments is immediately invested with banks and laws, and that is passed that makes it illegal, a law is passed that makes it illegal to use the investment money to balance our budget deficits, and that each state has millions of shares of stocks and bonds and investment accounts that it could sell to balance the budget? These are investments accounts, folks. These aren't balancing budget accounts, and they differentiate it so they could hide it, as we'll get into. Now, what if you learn that there is enough money in these investment accounts to get completely out of debt and have money left over for a very sizable refund to every man, woman, and child, and that it represents 83% of the wealth in the stock and bond markets? What if you could find all this information in public records under each state and municipal's comprehensive annual financial reports, which anyone can Google and see for yourself? So what they did is they created these investments, so when the money comes in, they invest it, and when it's held, it's invested, and then they declared that you cannot use investment money to satisfy budget deficits. How cool is that? And this has been going on for decades. So every county, state, city, and municipality has a budget detailing costs and expenses. These budgets do not include total gross receipts. For many years, people accepted the accounting practices that guide these formal budgets. Walter Buren had spent over a decade investing the comprehensive annual financial reports. He was a former commodities advisor. The CAFR, or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is never mentioned in the media and virtually unknown to the public, but it confirms the existence of a parallel government accounting system that only shows the public one side of the story. So if they claim we're broke and running a deficit, but in fact we have billions and trillions of dollars in our budget surplus. These are in the investments accounts. Have you ever noticed that when a bond or proposition gets passed in your state for a construction or land management project, the actual project itself sometimes isn't scheduled to begin until months or years in the future? It's even written in most bills that the project won't start a far offset future date. So here comes the money in, they invest it, they collect interest, they make money on it, and then it can't be used to balance the budget. Only the money designated for the project is used. And that's not all. They have many different ways they do this. It's scamming or skimming off the top. The money for the proposition or bill is immediately released upon passage of legislation. The taxpayer money gets directly into what we call a holding account. Then it's invested, it gains interest, it builds up extreme wealth, and months of years of interest and capital gains on investments from the original taxpayer-funded money. When it comes time to use the original amount of money for the project, the capital gains of that supposedly dormant money are separated from the original amount into the holding account and stays in the government's discretionary investment coffers. And we'll get into discretionary funds in a little bit here. So the profit is no longer considered tax since it was earned by investment or by accrued interest. Here's how the legalese comes in. They call it an investment tax, not a budget. Okay? So mainly in other investment funds called fiduciary and enterprise funds, these are the two overarching funds that govern the money when they siphon it off when it comes in, grease the pockets of the in-the-know politicians and corporations and other people. Some open what are called self-insurance funds and then draw dividends for themselves and their fellow conspirators for the rest of their political careers by insuring themselves with their own insurance funds. And the cycle goes on and on and on. Get this. For the last 70 years. This is why the politicians never leave office, the Nancy Pelosi's, all of these guys that are in office never leave office because they're all in on the scam and they're getting paid incredible wealth. They're making incredible wealth on their self-insurance funds. So the money made on these individual government investments is not shown because it's not the taxpayer budget any longer. And that doesn't have to be accounted for by the taxpayers. Again, credit to Clint Richardson at a reality blog, which I'll put in the notes. He's done extensive work on this. And you can go through this. It's a pretty long piece I did on here. Where does all the taxpayer investment money go? Well, as I showed you, $32 trillion. This is back in 2012. Is hidden in offshore accounts. Much bigger than that. Here's Walter Buren's account, the biggest game in town. All right, so CAFR. What is the definition of CAFR? It's commingled fiduciary and enterprises funds, and it's the other set of books that includes all the government income, investment, and assets. Commingled funds are the fiduciary investment and enterprise, like lottery, pensions, workman comps, public utilities, public golf courses, insurances, and tax revenues and expenditures. So fiduciary is investments, and the enterprise is all the other taxes. I owe, so it's off to work I go. All have been broken down into individual funds with their own profit and loss and balance sheets that require a comprehensive financial report to fully understand the total value. These reports are the only place we can view the full extent of the government's funds, investments, and holdings and the use of them. It's set up as a simple, quick evaluation to show total income, total assets, total investments, and total net worth. Never a peep about the public. Due to money control involved, the governments from all across the country have been developing their own non-tax income for over 65 years. If you want to search for the CAFR, any state, municipality, golf course, utility, whatever, just put in comprehensive annual financial report or CAFR, and you can see where the money is here. So the CAFR is set up to be an evaluation tool. As we said, it costs $30,000 a year to maintain a house. Say our salary or our income was $100,000 a year and we had $1 million in investments and our total net worth was $3 million. What if we talked only about our $30,000 budget as being our net worth? It would be ludicrous. But this is what the government does, okay? So is this an intentional scam? You betcha. This has been going on for 65, 70 years. They just happen to leave out decades and decades and decades of investment wealth that has been building up. The decades and decades of an enterprise and venture projects have created separately from the budgetary process. The CAFR was created by a group called the Government Financial Officers Association in 1946 is when they started accounting for it. There are over 54,000 separate corporations within a local government. 54,000 in each local government, folks. Every CAFR report is a separate corporation. A city is a corporation, a state is a corporation, a school district is a corporation, each filing their own separate report. They see the tens of billions of dollars they never knew existed in their floor. Then I bring to their attention, you're just looking at the state report. Let's look at Washington. It has $64 billion in liquid investment funds. Now the state of Washington has 2,300 separate local government corporations filing their own separate reports in the cities, counties, school districts, and authorities. Now remember, they get investments and they get interest on this, folks. So they make money on the money of other people's money. It's called OPM, other people's money. And then they invest it and declare we can't use it for the budgetary process. And so that's why we're always broke. The president of the country is a lawyer along with his wife, and that was back in the Clinton days. For more than half of all U.S. presidents, 56 of 100 senators, over 35% of the congressmen, and most state governors are all bar attorneys. BAR stands for British Accredited Registry, registered in the City of London, and they're all lawyers, so they all know about this, and that's why they are still in power. So, commingled funds. They're government mutual funds, not included in the state budget reports. They're separate. So they have to keep, it's not allowed to be a part of the budget accounting, as I've said a few times now. And there's the two type of main funds, the enterprise fund and the fiduciary fund. Each time money comes in, there's a separate fund with a separate profit and loss of schedule of revenues and expenditures dedicated solely to that fund, but put under the overarching commingled funds. All right. So the enterprise funds is the operations of government. An enterprise CAFR is established to account for operations. The fiduciary fund is based for investments. These invest and use our money to make non-budget profits and investments partnering with private businesses, banks, and other countries. The fund accounting also has been applied for investment accounting, portfolio accounting, and security accounting, all synonyms describing the process of accounting for a portfolio of investments such as securities, commodities, and real estate held in an investment fund such as a mutual fund or hedge fund. All right, so let's take a look at California and how this actually goes about in breaking down. 2-3 years ago, the California was in a terrible state budget in 2008, 2009, and they were closing down California parks and said they had discovered that there was an excess of deficit of $55 million. Only problem is the Sun Mercury News reported that there was $2.3 billion found in 500 accounts under the CAFR State Park Fund. So this was brought up, and then it was shuttered by immediately. The article was closed. I happened to catch it and copy it. But 2.3 billion in the state park fund, while they're declaring there's a 55 million deficit. This is just one example of how they do it. And here I list all the money in the different funds, or Clint Richardson did actually, I'm sorry, and posted this all, and this will be in the show notes. So just look how much money we're talking about here. So here we have over $20 billion in the total special revenue fund. And then we go into the enterprise funds. This is just California, folks. 34 million, 3 billion, 159 million. Then we get to the pension and employee trust benefits. These are paid into money that gets invested, and then they tell us there's no money there, folks, because they steal it and put it in their offshore accounts. Judges Retirement Fund, all of these pension funds, University of California Fund, $55 billion, folks, and they're raising tuitions on everybody. And Janet Napolitano, the Jesuit running the University of California, stealing funds and having lavish parties and whatnot. It's all a scam. It's all a scam, folks. We got to wake up. All right, so this is under hiding the money in thousands of government funds. So government accounting is different. A government entity has many coffee cans or funds, and money comes in and goes out. A big government entity has hundreds, even thousands of coffee cans. What money is allowed to go in a particular coffee can is determined by law, and you can't just take money from one and put it in another. The general fund can take money from anywhere, taxes, fees, assessments, and so on, but the debt service fund can only take money from certain sources. The revenue fund can only take money from certain revenues. A special assessment fund can take it from that particular assessment. This is the game they play. To help you in understanding, let's say you have a checking account with $1,000 in the savings account and $10,000 in two different banks. You only reported to the government that you had $1,000 as your net worth because you didn't want to use your savings to pay your bills, taxpayer obligations. You'd be audited and put under a federal debtor's prison. But for the government, this simple designation of non-governmental or non-taxpayer income and investment returns allows them to hide all of this wealth from the people in the budget report while never mentioning the funds and wealth that's in the CAFE report. This is our money we've paid into, folks. This is our money. So Clint Richardson on page 107 of California CAFERS shows $6 billion annual interest cost and $164 million in state debt are also cover-ups when contrasted with taxpayers' investment. A sharp irony is that many of California's investments are in other government debt securities. This means a net loss to taxpayers as one group pays another interest minus the cost of managing the debt. Now remember, when every investment banker does a transaction, they get a fee on top of this. This is where they create all this wealth. California has over 5 million shares of Morgan Stanley stock and Bank America stock and Citicorp. They could sell off all of these and have incredible wealth, as I'll show you. And each California, here it is down here, would receive over $50,000 if $600 billion was returned to California's 12 million households. Yet nobody even knows about this. Our pension funds, we could access our pension funds and the money that the local municipalities have, and we could keep it at home instead of investing in offshore accounts, investing in international funds, national funds, and even state funds. What if the local municipalities were able to take care of their own with I know in Mendocino County, there's over $230 million in the pension funds, and we had a choice of how we invested it in our local communities? Just think about that for a moment, folks. We could change everything in a heartbeat. The state claims they need to overtax Californians 320 times just to pay their bills. All right, so let's move on. I can get going on this for days. So let's add up what we found here and see if California could pay off its debt tomorrow and never have to issue a taxpayer bond again. So here we see the special revenues funds. This is all money sitting there that they all get interest on and put in their offshore accounts, folks. Every day, it just rings up. They don't do anything. They steal our money, putting in these separate funds by law, and then they just take it. I don't want to get into the California tax fund, but here, let's take a look at LA. The county of LA had a budgetary basis in 2007 of $17.5 billion. From 2008 to 2011, LA promoted how they were pulling in the belt and how they had to pull in the belt and cutting back expenses. The reality of the situation for those 5 years in the CAFER report showed that they increased the budgetary income from 17.5 billion to 25.8 billion, an increase of 8.3 billion or 47% increase. As they promoted a population, they were in dire straits and having to cut back, and we have to pay more and more. Are you getting how this works? I hope so. So money, like just here's this CalPERS just happens to own 5 million shares of Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan 11 million shares. These are all money that they bought these stocks with our money on, folks, called them investments and said we can't use it to balance the budget, yet it's all in Wall Street. It's all in the Wall Street game, okay? So here's how's the California pension fund scam. It's a special case. This is a worldwide pension system. So we're under the Roman Social Security, and it's a worldwide pension system. And I'm going to show you how the Social Security is under a worldwide a pension system that we're under. So the taxpayer money is being contributed to these pension funds with no benefit to the majority of tax holders in the state. The employees themselves have no equity in the taxpayer portion of contributions that are given over to the pension funds and is the property of the government fund, not the employees. So they put it in the investment accounts and you never see it again. So let's look how much they've contributed. $18 billion, $6 billion from corporations from employees, taxpayers $12 billion. Remember that the so-called budget deficit was quoted by the governor in 2012 was only $15.7 billion, revised from $9.2 billion. So here's contributions totaling, what is that, $37 billion. And they're saying that the budget deficit was $9.2 billion. We could pay off the deficit in a heartbeat. This means that 37.6 million people lived in California as of July 1st, 2011, paid over $12 billion to support state employees by allowing the California government to give their taxpayer-funded money to the pension and fund systems. Okay? I hope you're getting upset. You should be. All right, so I want to go over how the California lottery works. Now, this is another scam. So they have a lottery in every country or in every state. A lot of counties, I think, are doing them too. So here you pay in your money over 6 months. Let's say they take in $25, $30 million or something over this period of time. Well, every time the money comes in, every dollar, every day, it gets invested. They have overnight investment rates. You can make money in a matter of hours. So as soon as the money comes in over months, it gets invested. So the lottery fund cash is put in the electric fund transfer and the risk management fund and the California Police Officer Memorial Fund and the surplus money investment fund. California has taken in $59 billion in lottery proceeds since 1985. They're required to contribute almost $30 billion to the education fund, and $30.5 billion is paid out to lucky winners over time, with $19 billion in operating and administration expenses. $19 billion in operating and administering expenses. Just give out a lottery ticket and give people back the money they took in. Crazy, huh? Lottery money comes in through the ETF and is put in a fund invested by the state. Weeks and months of investment increases. The government takes and keeps the investment income. Then a winner is declared, but by law, they must pay half, close to half in that kind of money in taxes. So the government simply says, would you like to pay out over 26 years where they can take your money that they've taken in, let's say it's $50 million, they're paying you $25 million over time, so they get to invest it. Or they can pay you the $25 million out of the $50 million, and they get to keep the $25 million in investment funds. All the while, they made money while investing your money as it came in while they were making the lottery until the date it was funded. See how this works? So the education fund is a vague term. No money goes to the schools as stated. They can call the fund anything they want, but the proof is in the pudding. Where does it go? Every single winner is going to have 25 to 30% to the federal government, which is a huge reason they allowed legalized gambling. Okay? The state then takes the investment money and invests it in the federal securities through banks who make bank on fees. All right? If you read your state constitution, you'll find that the concept of personal property does not really exist. It was required for the people of a territory to give all lands to the United States. This I covered in the previous, that we do not own our land. We are just simply tenants. Banks do not lose anything from a foreclosure if you default on a loan, because money is created when banks make loans to persons. Since the money is created in a bank loan, the bank has not loaned you any of its own money, which is why it needs no reserves to cover the loan. It monetizes your loan application and documents through the Fed, and then as a middleman, loans you the newly created money out of nowhere. The bank has then got a zero balance at the time of the loan. The contract, you agree via contract to pay the bank, which is all profit, both principal and interest. The bank is just helping and scamming you to create the money that technically you could create by being your own bank. The bank has no interest in seeing you succeed in making your loan payments. They would much rather have you create more money for a new loan, for which again it will use none of its own money. This is why they keep loaning money, $1 trillion for prime interest car loans, student debt, 1.3 trillion, home loans. This is how they get us. The whole thing is just a big scam, folks. There's no free country, and you don't own anything that can't be taken away. You have no private property unless you're willing to fight. Sadly, most are not. So anyway, I could go on, but it's all ruled by the Vatican. And here I want to get into the Vatican claims they're 19 million in red. Give me a break. They say they're trying to help the poor, and they're preachers for the poor, yet they hold more wealth than all of us combined in a factor of huge. They could sell just a few of their paintings in the Vatican Library vault and pay off all the world's debt, end hunger and whatnot. Just to note, the Vatican is a corporation. The Vatican government both operate as non-profit and for-profit. So what they did is they created a corporation for an individual and created a corporation for the federal government. So both have an annual financial report. Both the Vatican and the government have real estate holdings. They both promote debt while hiding their investment asset balances. They both have a central bank which bails them out in the moment of needs, then expects Catholic or taxpayers to pay the bill. They openly lie by omission to the people of the earth. Both use depreciation of capital assets to show on their financial reports a liability against the other assets in order to increase reportable value of these investments. It's all tricks, guys. Both create budgets that are falsely imploded with such things as future liabilities so as to justify its raising of taxes and its request for tithing. Give us, please, we're so broke. Both create separate sub-corporations with their own financial statements as for profit entities, but to not use these profits for the benefits of the people. Both lay off employees with the excuse of budget shortfalls. Both own and control the media through stock investment and coercion, and use it to hide all of this from the people by keeping them entertained with everything but this information. It's ironic that the Vatican, we can see perhaps the best example of how government corporation lies by the act of utter and ridiculous disassociation and non-disclosure of true wealth. And yes, the Vatican is a corporation. It's a nation state. It also calls itself a church. So I'll put this in the show notes. There's a lot more here for you to go through, including how the Social Security is it's $2.6 trillion in assets, and that money is ours, but they put it in an investment account, so we can't get it. So I'll put this all in here. You can read more, but please share this with people. Here's another one from Carl Henman. Using data from the Bank of International Settlement, IMF, World Bank, Chief Economist McKinsey James Henry reports that 1% have deposited $21 trillion to $32 trillion in tax havens to evade taxes. Okay, the so-called rainy day accounts, $32 trillion, are tragic comic in non-disclosure and non-performance for budget, infrastructure, and pension filing. And I said before, California has $8 trillion in surplus. This is as of 2012. So you can read more and more about how this goes on and the rainy day funds excuse and whatnot. But I think you get the idea now how money is skimmed off the top. And get into the Social Security and all the countries. They've created this International Social Security Fund, or the International Social Security Association, again, a corporation, where they can funnel the money off even further. And so the chances of it getting back are even more harder to trace as they put layers and layers in corporations and whatnot. But please read the show liner notes and let's yell fire, folks. It's time to start screaming about this. The taxation is slavery, and we need to wake up as to where our hard work and labor is going. And it's not going back to us, and they're just going to keep bleeding us until we yell stop.
Mr. Jones owned a cotton plantation and many slaves. One day he was talking to the owner of the plantation next to his, and Mr. Jones was lamenting the fact that times were tough. He was having to work his slaves harder than ever, and was having trouble with some of them being disobedient or trying to run away. The other plantation owner said he knew someone who could help.
Day 1.
One day, Mr. Jones called his slaves together so a man named Mr. Smith could talk to them. Before beginning, Mr. Smith whispered to Mr. Jones, "Whatever I say, do not contradict me or interfere, and I promise you your slave troubles will end." "My name is Mr. Smith," he said to the slaves, "and this may be the happiest day of your lives. From today forward, you will no longer be slaves, but free men." Mr. Jones was so shocked he started to step forward, but Mr. Smith gestured for him to remain silent. He did, only because the other plantation owner had spoken so highly of Mr. Smith's skills. "You are no longer the property of Mr. Jones," Mr. Smith continued. "You are free. No more will you be forced to labor for the benefit of Mr. Jones. Now you can work for yourselves." Now the slaves were all murmuring and looking at each other. Many were smiling, many were looking puzzled. "In fact, you are now free to leave the plantation whenever you want," Mr. Smith said. "However, since we are surrounded by other plantations, if you leave, some other plantation owner will likely claim you as his own the moment you set foot on his property. So I urge you not to risk your newfound freedom by doing something so foolish. Instead, I suggest that you stay here, no longer as slaves, but as willing participants and part owners of this plantation. Yes, this is now your plantation." Mr. Jones bit his tongue to keep from objecting. "For now, we might as well leave Mr. Jones in charge," said Mr. Smith, "since he's the only one with any experience at running a plantation, which is quite a complicated thing to manage. But he will no longer be your master, but just another worker on the plantation. In fact, he will now be using his organizational and management skills to serve you. Whatever problems you may have had with him before, you are now all equals, and you need each other to make this work. If we all cooperate and work together, we can all reap the benefits together. In honor of this happy occasion, I present you this new symbol of togetherness and cooperation, this flag, which shall be the emblem of the new free Jones plantation." He held up the new flag, but most of those listening were still too amazed to respond. "And this shall be our motto," Mr. Smith announced. "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all. To celebrate, everyone has the rest of the day off. Enjoy your freedom, do as you please, and be back here tomorrow morning, bright and early, so that we may begin work on this great and noble new endeavor as equal free men." Finding Mr. Smith was serious, the former slaves applauded and cheered.
Day 2.
"We all want this plantation to do well," Mr. Smith said at the beginning of the next meeting, "so we can all share in the benefits. We all know that it takes a lot of effort to make a cotton plantation work. Just because you're all free doesn't mean you can stop working. In fact, since you're now working for yourselves, I expect you to work even harder than ever before, but now with pride and joy, knowing that you're working for yourselves. Of course, there still have to be rules. If everyone just does whatever he wants, the plantation won't produce anything. This experiment will fail and we'll all starve. You should be thankful that Mr. Jones has agreed to stay on to lend his knowledge and skills to this endeavor, and I trust you will all do your own part to make this work. Several of you have been chosen to act as project supervisors to manage different aspects of the operation, to make sure everyone is doing his assigned job, to make sure that the rules are followed, and so on. The rest of you may head out in the fields to start your first day of work as free men."
Day 3.
The next morning, Mr. Smith had a grim expression on his face as the daily meeting began. "I have an unpleasant duty to do today," he said. "Yesterday, Charles was caught keeping some of the cotton he picked, presumably to sell for his own personal profit. That is against the rules. That is stealing. For that, Charles must be punished." Two men tied Charles to the whipping post. "I take no joy in this," Mr. Smith continued, "but you must understand, if we do not maintain order, if we do not have rules that we all abide by, then the plantation will fail, and we will all suffer." The whip cracked against Charles' back. "But if we all pitch in for the common good, then we can all prosper. Being free doesn't mean you should be selfish and greedy. We must each do our assigned duties and obey the rules, and then we can all benefit, and each of you will receive your appropriate share of the profits." A young man named Samuel stepped forward. "But if you and Mr. Jones decide the rules and whip us if we disobey, how is that any different from what we had before?" "How can you say that?" Mr. Smith asked. "I'm shocked. You were a slave before, and now you're free. Things still need to be managed and organized by those best qualified to do so. Do you know how to run a plantation, Samuel?" "Well, no," he answered. "But if we're free, why do we get no say in what the rules are and how things work?" "I'm surprised at your ingratitude," Mr. Smith answered. "None of you know how a plantation is run, so you're in no position to be making decisions about how things are done here. You don't seem to appreciate all the things that Mr. Jones provides for you, from protecting you from all the outside threats you know nothing about, those who would come here, capture and enslave you if not for Mr. Jones' protection, to making sure that you all have food and housing, tools to work with, that you're cared for when sick and injured, and so on. There wouldn't be a plantation at all, no cotton to pick, no land to plant and harvest if not for him. You should be grateful that he's made possible the level of comfort you now have. Your lives would be far worse if not for him. Nevertheless, as free and equal participants in this endeavor, from now on at each meeting, any worker may have 2 minutes to ask questions or voice suggestions or complaints. With that, the workers all seemed satisfied and headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton.
Day 4.
I have a big announcement, Mr. Smith said as the day of the meeting began. Mr. Jones' cousin is here, and not just to visit and see how our project is coming along. It has been decided that from now on, you will be deciding who will manage the plantation. Of course, this job can't be done by just anyone, but every 3 months we will have a special meeting at which all the workers will vote on whether we think Mr. Jones should run the plantation or whether we think his cousin, Mr. Johnson, should run the plantation. That means that ultimately you are in charge because you will be deciding which man you want running things on your behalf. If you don't like the way things are being managed, you now have the power to change it. Amazed and pleased, the workers headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton. Days passed, months passed, a year passed, and the plantation continued to operate as before. Sometimes Mr. Jones was in charge, sometimes Mr. Johnson was in charge, but the day-to-day routine stayed exactly the same. The workers worked hard, long hours every day, and still had little to show for it. Every day the meeting would begin with them all reciting the Jones Plantation motto, "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones Plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all." One day Mr. Smith announced, "Samuel is asked to say a few words this morning, and whatever the rest of us may think of his ideas and opinions, we are all free here, and that means we are all allowed to speak our minds. So, Samuel, you have 2 minutes. Begin." Samuel stepped forward, looking scared. "I was excited when all this started," he began, glancing nervously at Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones. "But don't you all see what's happened here? Nothing's changed. We're all still slaves." There were grumbles of disagreement from the crowd. "They tell us what to do and whip us if we don't. They still make all the rules and punish us if we disobey. They let us make suggestions and complain about things, but they never really change anything. They let us choose between Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson, but what's the difference? The situation stays the same. We do all of the work and they take as much as they want and decide how much they'll let us keep. They live in luxury, made rich by the cotton we pick. We do all the work and have to build our own huts, grow our own food, and take care of ourselves. They leave us just enough that we don't revolt or run away. This is not freedom. We're all still slaves. They've only changed the words they use, but nothing else has changed. They say we're all free and equal, but we're not. They command and we obey. That's not freedom. That's not equality. They say we're free to leave, but all that means is that we're free to be someone else's slave. Why should we work or obey the rules? We didn't agree to this. They made the system. They forced it on us. They control and rob us and call it freedom. They've deceived you into thinking that being able to choose which slave master you'll work for is the same as being free. It's not. Open your eyes. If you keep what you produce, they call it stealing. When they take what you produce, they call it sharing and fair distribution. Can't you see that this is all your time? Ease up, Samuel, Mr. Smith announced calmly. At his gesture, 2 supervisors grabbed Samuel by the arms and led him to the whipping post. "I'm sorry, Samuel, but you've broken the rules. There are rules against encouraging others not to work and encouraging others to break the rules. You're only hurting all of us with your discontentment and your complaining and your disobedience." The whip fell and Samuel let out a grunt. "Without rules, without order, all would be lost. Without law, there would be chaos. We can't just behave as wild animals, each doing whatever he pleases. We must all follow the plan and all do our duty for the betterment of everyone. And those who do not must be punished." The whip fell again and blood flowed freely from Samuel's back. "Samuel, it is you who are stealing from the others. When you don't do your assigned work, you are making more work for others. When you disobey the rules, it is you who are endangering the future of everyone else here. You are the thief. You are the criminal. You are the one trying to destroy the arrangement that keeps us all safe and prosperous." At every lash of the whip, the other workers cheered louder and louder, some yelling curses at Samuel. "Being spoiled and selfish, you complain about everything, talking as if you're oppressed. But you are the one ruining things. You are the one keeping us from being all we could be. It is your greed and your rebelliousness that is hurting all of us. They all play by the rules," Mr. Smith said, gesturing at the others. "What makes you think that you don't have to? You think you're above the law?" There were loud yells of agreement as the whip fell again. "We must maintain order," Mr. Smith proclaimed. "To make this plantation great, to make it so that we can all be happy and prosperous. To have the society we want, there have to be rules. We all have to contribute our fair share to this great endeavor, and we cannot tolerate actions and attitudes that seek to undermine the amazing things that together as free men we have achieved and will continue to achieve. Mr. Jones was smiling as he gave Mr. Smith a pat on the back. The crowd was cheering so loudly that none of them had noticed that Samuel had died.